2018. Hello. I'm gonna make another video this year. Last year, I made one that kind of gave a big picture overview of my life, from the very beginning to where I'm at today. This year, instead of focusing on the chronology of my life, I want to focus on sharing a handful of stories, starting with the story of Yaya and Baba. Yaya and Baba are my grandparents on my mom's side. Side note, I'm getting over a cold. That's what the scratchy voice. Anyway, so quick refresher from last year's video. Yaya and Baba had 5 daughters, and my mom was the second of those 5. But before all that is the story of how Yaya and Baba grew up and ultimately met each other. Let's start with Yaya. Yaya was born in April 1931, and that was in Turkey. When she was about 3 years old, she, her older brother, and their mom, who Yaya describes as someone who was a very brave and courageous woman. So the 3 of them went to Egypt to visit her grandma. So my Yaya's Yaya. I'll try not to confuse you too much. Anyway, my Yaya's dad did not go with the family to Egypt. He was an older man and had a lot of health issues. In fact, so the visit to Egypt was just supposed to be 1 to 2 months long. But around 1 to 2 months in, they found out that he had actually passed away. So Yaya and her mom and brother stayed in Egypt and never went back to Turkey. So they lived with my Yaya's Yaya. And when Yaya was about 4, she started going to a German school that was right across the street. After elementary school there, when it was time for high school, the family had the money to send her to an English school. Throughout the years, her mom had been working. She was an excellent seamstress, and her brother had been working too. He got jobs anywhere and everywhere, so he could help out with finances. So Yaya went to high school, graduated, and then became a substitute teacher at that German school she originally went to. For a year, she taught. And during that time, her Yaya sadly got very ill. She and her Yaya had a great bond. During the summers, her Yaya would teach her Armenian, they'd play backgammon together. She also instilled the Bible and Christianity. She played a very important role in my Yaya's life. So when she got sick, one of my Yaya's aunts, who was living in California, she came to Egypt to visit. And she lived with the family for 6 months. Now, California had always been a place that my Yaya wanted to see. So her aunt said, well, when I go back, why don't you come with me for a few months? And that's exactly what she did. When Yaya and her aunt got to the US, they spent the first 3 weeks in New York with relatives. And then they flew to California. Her aunt's husband's nephew, I know, kind of confusing, he picked him up from the airport. And little did Yaya know that he was gonna be her husband, Baba. So that happened on a Tuesday. That Saturday night was Baba's parents' 25th anniversary party. Yaya and Baba saw each other again, and Yaya says that they sorta kinda liked each other right off the bat. But she thought, he's in America, I live in Egypt, forget about it, right? Well, a month later, they proposed. So she writes to her mom, asks permission to stay and get married, and gets this beautiful letter back. Her mom said, I have full trust in you. And that was that. They got married. Okay, so let's back up now. I want to bring you up to speed on Baba. Baba was born in 1926 in Troy, New York. He was the older of 2 boys. Their father was in the butcher business. He had 2 to 3 shops around town. Now, when Baba was 9 years old, he was hit with rheumatic fever, which took him out of school for several months at a time. And he'd get hit again with it every 2 to 3 years, to the point where it really started affecting his heart. Now, when Baba was old enough to go to college, his dad said to him, son, you can go to any college as long as you stay here in Troy. Now, at that time, Troy only had 2 universities. One was pharmaceutical, the other was engineering. So Baba went the engineering route and became an aeronautical engineer. Now, at the age of 21, he graduated from university, but was hit again with that rheumatic fever. Doctor said, for your health, you've got to get out of New York. He was told that the 2 options he had were California or Texas. His mom had 2 brothers living in California, so the whole family chose California. So just 2 years later, at the age of 23, that's when Baba met and married Yaya. And 1 year later, they had their first daughter. 2 years after that, they had their second daughter, my mom. Ultimately, they were blessed with 5 amazing daughters. Now, they lived in LA, 2 doors away from Yaya's in-laws, until they were expecting their 3rd daughter. Baba worked for Lockheed for a little bit, decided it wasn't for him, so he then started working in an insurance business. Then went to an escrow office, but that was 30 miles away from home, so they moved to where his work was, and that led him to construction. He took these night classes, and then he actually started building. They'd moved to the San Fernando Valley, which at that time was a new area. He built built 40 houses in Van Nuys, then did exclusively commercial construction. Restaurants, shopping centers, office buildings, and he stayed in the construction business until the day he retired. Now, any story about Baba, and about our whole family, is incomplete without telling the story of St. Peter Church. Now, I'm obviously biased, but this is one of my favorite stories about my family, and my family's history. So, when Yaya met Baba, he was singing in the choir at St. James Church in LA. He was a bass singer and had a wonderful voice. When they moved to the Valley in 1954, there was no Armenian church where they were living, and both Yaya and Baba felt the need for one. Driving into LA every Sunday morning with 2 to 3 children wasn't very easy. So, here's what they did. They decided to invite 5 couples to their home, and they invited the superintendent of the St. James Church. Now, they had no idea how to start a Sunday school there. The plan was to have 3 weeks of Sunday school there, and then once a month, on the 4th week, go to LA for church service. So, how do you start a Sunday school without knowing who's gonna attend? That's where the superintendent came in. He gave them a bunch of awesome tips on how to go about it. He was there to answer all of their questions. So, the next time they all came together, they decided they would all have their phone books. I know, we're going way back. And they'd each take a letter from the phone book. They'd go down the list and pick out all of the Armenian last names. Side note, Armenian last names end in IAN. There's a fun fact for you. So, they picked out those names and all their addresses, and then they sent out flyers saying, we're having a picnic on such a such day. Anybody who is in the Valley and interested in Sunday school, please show up. So, they invited all these folks and had an amazing attendance on that first day at a park of all places. So, they thought, oh, this looks pretty good. Then they decided to go look for a place to meet on Sunday mornings. Well, most churches already had Sunday schools themselves, but this one church rented out their basement to have Sunday school classes for whoever was gonna show up. Well, the first Sunday at that location, it was so packed. All these children came. So, right after that, those original 6 couples, including Yaya and Baba, looked for a bigger place. They ended up renting the top of a police station. It had a great big hall and a kitchen they could use. And every Sunday, there'd be more and more children. Next, they rented the Masonic Hall. Yaya remembers her class was in one of the coat closets, which she said was actually wonderful because she had privacy. The other areas were kind of noisy. The group got that big. And then, about 60 years ago, they bought property on Sherman Way in Van Nuys. It was an iris farm with a little old hut in the middle, and that's where they held Sunday school classes. About 2 to 3 years later, they broke ground to St. Peter Armenian Church. Baba was chairman of the construction, he was parish council chairman, and he was choir director until about 2 years before he passed away. To this day, St. Peter is booming. It's packed every Sunday. You know, Baba gave up his business for a whole year to build St. Peter Church, and he loved every moment. You know, there are so many more details that I could dive into, but for now, it is already almost time to wrap up this year's video. First, I want to bring the story back to Yaya. To this day, Yaya has 7 great-grandchildren. When she talks about her life and her family, she doesn't like to use the word pride, but instead she says how grateful she is. Grateful for her husband, Baba, grateful for her 5 daughters, her parents, her brother, her cousins, her in-laws, including Baba's brother, my namesake, her grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and, of course, all of the friends over the years too. She has lived and continues to live a life of gratitude. And on that note, I cannot think of a better way to bring chapter 2 of my story in 365 to an end. It's been another fun year making another one of these videos, and you know what? There is still more to the story. Also, I've always liked trilogies. Godfather, Back to the Future, Toy Story. Well, they're making another one. Anyway, I want to do chapter 3. So let's keep this going. Now, as you know, chapters 1 and 2 both focused on the past. For chapter 3, I'm looking at the future. 2019. Hello.